ultimate Dead by Daylight nurse guide. What I want this video to be is basically a one-stop shop for everything that you could need to play nurse in Dead by Daylight. From the basic inputs of the killer, to perk builds you might want to run, to extremely niche techs that are only valid in extremely high-end games, and a full add-on and map tier list for the killer. I want everything that you could need to be in this video right here. So I'm gonna flash up timestamps now of everything that is in the video. So if there's one specific thing that you need clicking on, you should be able to find it very quickly just using the chapters below. But let's just get straight into it. Okay, so starting first of all, the first thing you want to know about nurse is the basic inputs. If you hold the M2, the left trigger, if you're on controller, you will start charging instantly your blinking power. However, if you're traveling in your first blink, some people don't know that if you recharge, it will basically, if you hold down that button, it will start charging as soon as you land, which is really useful in some situations. And that's actually the same for your swing button, whether that's mouse 1 or the right trigger. If you start pressing M1 as you're traveling in your blink, that means as soon as you land, you will instantly swing, which is also extremely useful. Another thing that a lot of nurse players don't understand is the edge of the map. Even if it seems like you would be able to blink across it, you cannot blink through the edge of the map at all. And you can actually use this to your advantage in some situations. For example, if you're on a 2-story map and you're on the 2nd floor and the survivor's running back towards you and you have fully charged blink, you can flick to the edge map, cancel your blink because it won't let you blink through it, and then maybe sneak out a hit on the survivor. But that's just one thing to keep in mind. You cannot blink through the edge map no matter what. Now, the muscle memory of nurse is one of those things. There is no get-rich-quick scheme. It is simply just you have to play the games and learn how long do I charge for how far do I travel. And it's something that you will just get better at the more that you play. I do recommend for the first couple of games you can use plaid flannel just to get an eye in and see how it works with the add-on, because it shows you where you will land for how long that you charge. But I think I always use the analogy of BMX. When you first learn to ride a bike, you might use training wheels, but you're never going to see a professional BMX or a professional mountain biker using training wheels. Cutting off the map is also a really important concept on nurse, because nurse is just an incredibly strong defensive killer. If you identify an area of the map which you can completely lock down, maybe if you have 4, 3, 5 generators in the area, or if they're just generators that are upstairs or easy for you to defend, maybe they don't have a lot of line of sight so they can't see you coming, and that's something you probably want to do. And it's something that you should look to do, maybe not as soon as you load into the game, but just have a backup plan in mind. Now, another concept I want to explain is respecting the 20 meters. So nurse's first blink is a 20 meters in any direction you want to go, and you get a lot of pressure just from existing because the survivors don't want to be within 20 meters of you. That means if a survivor is on a generator within 20 meters of you, they are risking getting hit at any point, because you could just flick to that gen, blink on it, bang, you've got your hit. So the survivors either need to be pre-running or they need to be risking getting hit. So I think that's an important concept for the nurse player to understand. Another thing I want to go over is the importance of a hook in the middle of the map, purely for that reason. You will see in a lot of competitive matches, the nurses will never be given a hook in the middle of the map. The survivors will die as far in the corner of the map as they possibly can because they do not want to give a middle hook. If a nurse has a hook in the middle of the map, she can guard the hook and then normally within 20 meters can see, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 generators from that hook. And that is just a terrible situation to be in if you're a survivor. Another important concept to understand before you start playing nurse is that you cannot blink directly onto the survivor. If you do charge your blink up so that you land directly on the survivor, it will body block you as if you're blinking into a wall. And I think that's just something that's important to keep in mind. You're not trying to aim on top of the survivor. You're aiming to land just behind. And another concept that I didn't understand recently is on nurse, if you look down, it will completely cancel your blink. You will still have to teleport and it will still take time to do that, but you won't go anywhere. Now, the way that this works is if you imagine a line across the middle of your screen, or if your monitor has like a crosshair function that you can put on, when you look down, you will land just below where the middle of your screen cuts across with the ground on the map, which is a little bit weird to explain, but I should be flashing a clip up now, which makes a little bit more sense. But yeah, when you're canceling a blink, if you want to land maybe on the other side of shack or on the other side of a tile, you have to look down so that the middle of your screen crosses just above the ground where you want to land. Again, a little bit of a weird one to explain without any visuals, but it should make more sense with the clip on the screen. And now let's get into the most important thing, chasing. Now, audio is really important, and I think it is on Dead by Daylight in general, especially if you're playing killer, but also really important for survivor as well. And I think a good pair of headphones will go a long way. Obviously, it's not important, but relying on that audio can be really, really useful for you just to hear some footsteps, breathing, and if the survivor's injured, just having a rough idea of where they are is really, really useful, especially on a killer like the nurse. And one thing I want to say that a lot of people get wrong is don't be afraid to walk the survivors down as nurse or float them down, because obviously she's not walking. You don't need to be blinking all the time. If you have no information on where the survivor is, just walk and wait. If you know they're in a rough general area, but you don't know exactly where, walk them down, close down that distance, and that makes it so that when you do get the opportunity to blink, it'll be way easier to hit, rather than just taking a massive risk and gambling, which most likely won't pay off. Picking chases is also important. You don't want to be chasing in areas which are incredibly intricate buildings and hard to land blinks, and you ideally don't want to be chasing away from your generators. So if you see a survivor in the open by your generators, take that chase instead of following a guy to the other side of the map who's gonna lead you into a building on Haddonfield where you have to land an extremely precise blink, which you may mess up. Understanding patterns from the survivors is also really important as nurse. Often survivors will repeat the same jukes again and again and again, especially if they're working. So kind of as you're playing into the game, you want to remember, okay, maybe keep a mental note. Jake is doubling back a lot. Claudette likes to hold W and just send it. Meg likes to hold corners. Dwight likes to walk and try and lose me. Cheryl likes to run the edge map, that kind of thing. And then as soon as you're getting back into chase with that survivor, you have an idea of what they might do. And I feel like more often than not in public games, especially if the survivor isn't trying very hard, they do end up doing the same things. And if you're a survivor player looking on how to play against nurse, you should be having like 3 or 4 ideas on what you want to do, and varying them as much as possible, just so the nurse can't get a read on what you may do. You just have to be as weird as possible against a nurse. But if you are the nurse player, blinking to where you last saw the survivor in most situations is going to be the most beneficial thing. And if you've ever got a guaranteed hit just by tracing the survivor's movement because you're that close to them, so for example, the survivor's running around the jungle gym, you blink to the corner, and then you second blink right on them, you should take that hit every single time. You shouldn't be trying to do anything fancy. Just if you are close enough to the survivor, bang, bang, get the hit, and then if you want to go for some crazy prediction, you can do it on the next blink if you want to. Just the concept of always taking the guaranteed hits, I think, is really important. Your first blink should always be used to get line of sight on the survivor for the second blink. So normally blinking to like corners of jungle gyms or on the other side of a rock, if that's what the survivor's running, or if you are zoning them away from an area. For example, if a survivor's pre-running out of your gens and you want to chase them in the generators, using your first blink to push them back is also really useful. But they're the main things that you want to be using your first blink for in chase, in my opinion. And remember, you don't need to be exactly on the survivor with the first blink. You just need to be close enough to be able to adjust with the second blink to get that hit. Having a good idea on how fast the survivor moves at the 4 meters per second is also really important, because often you can lunge around a corner and hit the survivor, even if you can't see them. So just having an idea in your head of where the survivor could have gone, how far they could have gone, can I lunge around the corner and still get that hit, is really, really useful, and that's something you'll pick up as you play more. If I realize that I'm chasing a survivor that knows what they're doing against nurse, I will start to play a lot more safe. I won't go for an extremely risky prediction, because that's where those good survivors will start to really thrive. And sometimes it's just better. Just walk them down, get closer, guarantee that you know where they are before you get that hit. But most of those better survivors will be taking you to the edge map. For many reasons, the edge map is the best place to chase if you're a survivor against the nurse. At the very least, even if you die quickly, the nurse has to pick you up and carry you all the way into the map, which is extra time for your teammates to be doing generators. But also, on the edge map, you can chain these rocks, Z-walls, random little walls that spawn, trees that spawn on the edge map, as well as what we said before, that you cannot blink through the edge map as a nurse. And that often ends up being a better, longer chase with more variables for the nurse to think about than it would be if you were in the middle of the map. As a nurse player, it's always important to use like the little line of sight that you might get that the survivor might not be aware of. Whether this is like a hole in an Azeroth's jungle gym wall, a tiny little hole in shack, maybe like a window in main building that the survivor might not know about. If the survivor thinks you can't see them, they're not going to change what they're doing. They're not going to randomly double back. They're not going to randomly go to the right or the left. So if you can get some info when they don't know that you're getting info, then that is insanely valuable. And also a big thing you can do with nurse is just using the process of elimination. So I know the survivor went this way. I don't see them over here. I don't see them over here. So they must be behind this rock, for example. And you can do that a lot with crows as well, or even with your headset, hearing where the survivor is. I don't hear them to my right, so they must have held W. Or there's a crow that sat on the rock over there, so they haven't startled it, so they couldn't have gone past there. Just doing those quick little calculations to work out where the survivor is would be really, really useful, especially if they're trying to stealth you and then maybe try and double back. An extremely high-level concept that a competitive nurse player by the name of Laser explained to me is that you can even get info on the survivor by being body blocked. If you're extremely confident on where your blink is going to land and it doesn't land, that means that the survivor is there And in some extremely, extremely niche situations, you might be able to swing around the corner and get the hit, knowing where the survivor is because your blink didn't land. Another thing that a lot of newer nurse players struggle with chasing is playing pallets. But always the best scenario for you is just wait as long as possible on that pallet for the survivor to make the first move. If the survivor makes the first move too early, you just react and get the swing. Worst comes to worst, if the survivor knows the perfect timing, you can fatigue. They're not going to make too much distance because you're right on their back, and you should be able to catch them up relatively quickly. I have a YouTube short that I made a long time ago about the concept of flicking on nurse, which a lot of people don't understand. So I'm just going to play that for you now rather than explaining it again. Flicking with nurse is something I get asked about every stream and every video I upload. There are two main advantages to flicking. One, allowing you to gain information whilst traveling, seeing things that you wouldn't be able to see when you land out of your blink. For example, I can check this totem when I'm traveling, but I can't see it once I'm done blinking. Two, nurse always blinks in the direction that she's facing. So if you change the direction you're facing last second, you will catch a lot of survivors off guard and get a lot of free hits. And another thing in the game which has been really hard to understand for a long time is blinking out of base. Behavior, for whatever reason, changed it a few years ago. They don't want you to be able to blink like outside of the map, if that makes sense. So in order to blink out of basement, you need to stand by the middle hooks and then look up so that you're not going outside of the map as you go up. Again, a bit of a weird concept to understand, but just remember, when you're blinking out of basement, stand near the middle hooks, then aim up, and then blink out. And the last concept I want to explain is playing the 3v1 with nurse. And the whole concept of that is basically, if you play fast enough, the survivors will never get anything done. One survivor will be on a hook, one survivor will be getting saved, one survivor will be getting chased. So once you do have a survivor dead, if you're having quick enough chases, you can just keep chasing. They're not getting any progress on the gens, and I just think that's really important. There is a real high value on nurse on just playing fast enough that the survivors can't do anything. Hopefully you get some use out of those little tricks, or at the very least, you'll just understand how to play nurse a little bit better. And now I'm going to suggest some perk builds, I'm going to explain the add-ons, and we're going to do a map tier list. Okay, so something new that I wanted to put in the nurse guide this time around, a lot of people asked for, is an add-on tier list. So pretty self-explanatory. We're going to rank all of the add-ons, in my opinion, in what order they should be in terms of strength. And starting off, we've got 30% extra lunge on the second blink swing, or third blink swing if you're running on bookmark. This add-on is extremely good. It may not be the best in terms of overall strength, but for any level of player, if you run this add-on, you're going to get value out of it. It is a bit of a crutch add-on in the sense that if you get used to it, you might struggle when you take it off, but absolutely the best add-on in terms of raw strength for me. Whether you're running by itself, it doesn't need to be in a combo with anything. Just an extremely good add-on. Just 30% extra lunge. You're going to be hitting all of those things that obviously, you know, that you slightly miss. Maybe not the best for learning nurse, because it's going to give you hits when you shouldn't really be getting them. But in terms of an add-on, extremely good, extremely powerful. The best add-on on nurse, in my opinion. Now, number 2, Jenna's Last Breath. This is a bit of a weird one. This is the best add-on for nurse if you have a lot of experience on her. Purely for the reason that every calculation you need to make in the game, will the survivor hold W? Will they cut right? Will they cut left? Will they double back? That's the important one. You don't have to think about doubling back ever. So for the entire game, when you're calculating where can this survivor go, what can they do, you never need to think about doubling back. And that value that you get from that alone, just having to worry about all of the other things the survivor can do and never having to worry about the double back is crazy value. However, if you're newer to nurse, I don't think this is anywhere near as good, because it's going to be another thing in the back of your head constantly, like another input that you have to make in such a short amount of time with pressing shift or whatever button it is on controller. I actually don't know. I think it might be L1 maybe, or the left bumper if you're on Xbox. But yeah, Jenna's Last Breath, second best add-on for me. First place add-on if you have a lot of experience on nurse, but for the average player, I think probably second best, maybe even a little bit lower for the newer players to nurse. Third best add-on for me, constant value, is Fragile Wheeze. This is just mangled on the heel. Pretty self-explanatory. Yeah, for Fragile Wheeze, keeping the survivors injured is massively valuable on nurse for what I was talking about earlier in this guide. The whole idea of respecting the 20 meters, if a survivor is injured, they basically can't get in within 20 meters of you ever. So encouraging the survivors to stay injured and having more use on when they are forced to heal, it takes longer, is incredibly valuable on nurse, and that's why I've put Fragile Wheeze this high. Fourth add-on, maybe a bit low, or some of you might be surprised to see Torn Bookmark this low. Just the extra recharge time. It takes so long. It knocks it down quite a lot for me. However, I do think Torn Bookmark is way, way, way more valuable on a Nurse player that's newer to Nurse than it is for someone who's massively, massively experienced on Nurse. Simply because that third blink is going to help you out a lot more if you're more likely to miss your blinks than hit them, right? That makes a lot of sense. But how much longer it takes to recharge your blinks, I think really knocks it down for me. And I just think these 3 other add-ons just give you a lot more value. Maybe a controversial one. I just don't think the third blink add-on is as good as people think it is. Fifth one, okay, this is Campbell's Last Breath. This is the physics add-on, in my opinion, you know, 20 meters in one direction, 20 meters in the other. Run it for like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 games, and you get your eye in. This is also really good paired with Jenna's Last Breath, because you can just kind of ping pong around the map, which is really, really useful. But being able to have the map pressure of just 1 second you're here, another second you are 40 meters in the distance is crazy. And especially if you get the idea of the length of the 20 meters, you can be like, okay, I'm going to blink off in this distance, and then I am 20 meters away from that gen, so then I can land on that gen. And if you can get that down, it is incredibly, incredibly useful. But yeah, the map pressure that this add-on provides you, I think, for me, just bumps it up into that S tier. Now, A tier, for me, is the Tooth. I think the Tooth, you get a lot of value out. If you don't know what this is basically just Nurse's Calling, but it only works for 60 seconds after you hit the Survivor. A little fun note, by the way. I am that much of a no-life Nurse player that I don't have any notes on my screen about what these add-ons do. I just know it off the top of my head, which is kind of insane. But yeah, that's a bit of self-reflection. Maybe I should go outside a little bit more. Anyway, so after you hit a Survivor for the next 60 seconds, if they are healed or they are healing someone else, you see the aura, which is massively, massively valuable for all you're giving up here as an add-on. It's not a perk slot, which, you know, obviously has way more potential, in my opinion. Yeah, I mean, you can essentially make Nurse a 6 perk character with this Tooth and the Spoon giving you Strider and Nurse's Calling for free. And yeah, a lot in Nurse games, the survivors do have to heal. If they don't heal, it will inevitably probably be a reason that they lose the game. And that's why Tooth is so good on her. You can blink around the map and just see them in the distance, and then you get that opportunity to blink on their forehead if they're trying to stick out and last that heal. And also combos very well with our S tier add-on in Fragile Wheeze. Hey, next add-on in the A tier, I believe this is, oh god, I think this is Badman's Last Breath. I could be completely wrong. I'm going with Badman's Last Breath though. This is basically 45 seconds of undetectable after you hit a survivor. So you hit a survivor, you have no terror raiders for 45 seconds, which is incredibly valuable. However, you do have to remember that, you know, Nurse is screaming all the time every time she blinks. You would get a lot more value on this on an indoor map, and this does synergize really well with Face the Darkness, which I see a lot in competitive Nurse matches. It's not my favorite add-on in the world, but I can definitely see why people like it. But I also like to bring good add-ons that are going to work against, you know, a 4-man, that are going to be calming everything where I am at all times, as well as add-ons, you know, that just work against solo queue. Because I think if you're a decent Nurse player, you're going to be beating solo queue players pretty easily anyway. So you want add-ons and perks that are going to work against when you get, you know, that sweaty 4-man, that sweaty 3-man, that sweaty whatever man, twoof. You know, the rare game that you do see, you want add-ons that are going to work against those guys. And I think this add-on against survivors that are combing really, really well, unless you're on an indoor map, you're not going to get that much value out of it, and that's why I haven't put it in S tier. Maybe another controversial one, but I'm putting the Metal Spoon in A tier. Just the tracking that this gives you. It is Strider, if you know what that perks does. Not really used as much anymore since it's Fall from Grace. But just being able to hear the survivor louder, being able to track the survivor a little bit better through walls, I think is incredibly useful. I've actually been using Tooth and Spoon in my Nurse streak attempt. I think we're now up around 150, and it's been going really well. It's just really nice to not have to, I don't really concentrate on listening to where the survivor is, but just knowing where they are because it's that much louder. And yeah, I don't know. I hit the survivor's louder for 60 seconds. It's a brown add-on. That's pretty useful for me. I think I have about 5,000 of these on my Nurse at P100, and yeah, I'm gonna be whacking through them. I think it's a very good add-on. Okay, next one. This is Kavanagh's Last Breath. This used to be the range add-on. This might be one that I need to check, but I'm 99% sure this is the blindness status effect on the survivor for 45 seconds. So let me double check that. Okay, so it's not even that. When you fatigue, so basically this add-on rewards you for missing a blink. If you fatigue within 8 meters of a survivor, they gain blindness for 60 seconds. Now, blindness for 60 seconds is incredibly valuable. They're not going to know where their down teammates are, for example, if you wanted to slug. But, I mean, an add-on that rewards you for fatiguing next to the survivor. A little bit of a weird one. Yeah, not for me. Not one that I've ever really ran, and not one that I would really recommend people run either. And let's just move on. Okay, Plaid Flannel. This is the one that shows you the landing location of your blink. Incredibly good for newer players, but also something that you don't want to rely on. I think I use the analogy a lot of, yeah, training wheels are good when you're learning to ride a bike, right? But you're not going to see somebody that's doing like the professional BMX tricks with training wheels on. That makes sense. In the UK, we call them stabilizers. Fun fact. Yeah, so it's like you run it for maybe 5 games, get an idea of where the landing position is, how long you have to charge for how far you have to go, and then take it off. But I think, yeah, for the start, learning Nurse, very useful. Also, for testing purposes, very useful. I wouldn't want them to remove this from the game, because when there are those, like, dead blink zones on maps, I like going into custom games and putting this on and seeing where I can and can't blink, for example. You know? Seeing if, like, oh, is this doorway bugged, or can I actually land in it if I get the right timing? And Plaid Funnels are very useful for that. But in a normal game, load up and play against 4 random survivors type thing, you're not going to get too much value out of it outside of those first few matches learning how muscle memory works on Nurse, in my opinion. But still useful, and that's why I put it in beta. Now, okay, so my next one is the Pocket Watch. A little bit of a weird one, but I do think this add-on actually has some tech to it. With extremely high-level survivors are gonna expect you to fatigue at a certain time, so if you can hang on for a little bit longer and then blink onto their back, you are gonna get some value out of it. So there is some extremely niche situations where I see you getting some very good value out of this add-on, and it is something that I would like to test going against a competitive team with this add-on. However, the downside is very much there, and it's like, if you miss a blink, okay, the window is longer and it's going to take me longer to fatigue. So it's like you get extra punishment for missing, right? So it's kind of similar to egg on Wesker in a way. Very vaguely, in the sense that if you miss the first dash on Wesker and you have egg and you're not going to make the second dash, you just have to wait longer before you fatigue, right? It's the same on Nurse. Again, if you're learning Nurse, I definitely wouldn't recommend this add-on, but I can see some cases, some extremely niche cases, where you are going to get some good value. And that's why I've still put it in B tier. Okay, last one in B tier, I am doing, I want to say this is called Ataxic Respiration. I have not ran this in so long. Let me see if I'm right. It is Ataxic Respiration. Yeah, so it reduces fatigue by 7%, which is good. It's a good add-on. However, nowadays, Nurse still has to recharge her blinks. This wasn't a thing in the past, and back then I would have said, you know, having a short fatigue is very valuable. But nowadays, because Nurse is slower than the Survivor, and you have to recharge your blinks anyway, I don't think it's that good, but I can still see you get some value from the add-on, right? It's not making it worse. You can get some value from it. You see the survivors a little bit faster. Sure, I can understand in some cases this might be somewhat useful, but there's not going to be that many where it is. This add-on isn't going to win you the game, for example. Okay, and now we go on to C tier. So we're starting with the Matchbox add-on, which basically makes Nurse 105% movement speed with 1 blink, which I can't tell you how many times people have came to me and said, I've got a Nurse nerf idea. Let's just make it so Matchbox is base kit. Holy... that would be the worst change ever, in my opinion. The most boring thing to play against in the world, the most boring thing to play as in the world. You would just follow the survivors. Whenever they use a pallet or a window, you just blink over. You know what I mean? Doesn't make any sense to me at all. Personally, I don't like the add-on because it's just not really playing Nurse. It's a completely different killer. And it's not even a strong killer at that. So C tier seems about fair to me. I wouldn't ever really use it, in my opinion. Just not for me, you know? Okay, next one. I believe this is called Anxious Grass. The website is lagging a little bit. So this is just, it gives you extra blood points when you blink through a survivor and the survivor screams. Sure, I can see some niche situations where it might be useful, but realistically, not going to win you a game. Maybe you get a couple times a game where you blink through a survivor, but you would see the survivor anyway, because it's not like you're blind when you're blinking through. Extremely niche, weird add-on. Personally, I don't think I've ever really ran it, and that's not going to change anytime soon. This gives you less fatigue on additional chain blinks. Exact same reason as before, but I think this add-on is even less effective, so I would put it even lower. Okay, D tier. I'm actually going to add a tier below this super quickly. I am actually going to make an F tier of Nurse add-ons as well. So my first one in D tier is Serpent, which gives you extra movement speed in an extremely small window. So this gives you extra movement speed, 30% extra movement speed, I believe, after the first blink and before you fatigue. So you got to think, this is giving you 30% extra movement speed. Woo, brilliant. Wow, amazing. But the amount of time that it gives you this 30% extra movement speed is so small that it is near on useless. I actually put this in my killer add-on game show about a year back and got Otzdarva, Hens, and Taito to guess what the add-ons were, and I don't think any of them got this because it's so niche and so hard to tell that it's even being ran. Near on useless, in my opinion. Okay, next one in D tier is the Wooden Horse. This used to be bugged, and I've got a video on my channel from years and years ago of when it was bugged. This Nurse add-on was incredibly good. I loved it. It basically gave you decreased cooldown on successful fatigue attacks as well as unsuccessful ones, whereas the add-on is just meant to give you decreased cooldown on missed attacks. So again, it's like similar to plaid flannel and like training wheels, right? If you miss a fatigue attack, it's going to give you some value, but the value, even if you do miss, is not much at all. So that's why I've put it in D tier. Bottom end of D tier is after you hit a successful blink attack, you go to 115% movement speed. You gotta think, okay, so I hit a successful blink attack, right? The survivors made all the distance. Like, it's the perfect time where you don't want to be 115. It makes you 115, which I think is really important, and a lot of people don't think about that. You blink onto the survivor's back, right? You blink onto the survivor's back, you hit them, they make all the distance from just going injured, because they get that little injured sprint burst, and then you go to 115. So then you have to walk them down to then catch up the distance, where it's like, you'd rather be blinking to catch up that distance quicker, if that makes sense, right? So, again, completely changes Nurse like Matchbox, but I think it is arguably even worse. And now we have our F tier, which are both two add-ons. I just have these the other way around in my final tier list. These are both two add-ons, which I think actively make the killer worse. This one basically makes it so that your blink is so short, if the survivor just runs, always takes distance on you, you will basically never catch up. And Comb, so this is Bracelet, obviously that decreases your blink, this decreases your blink rate, and Comb decreases the lunge. So you basically just like lunge in place, kind of like a tier 1 Myers lunge. So you have to blink right on the survivor. Yeah, they're both terrible. They both make Nurse so much worse. I would never, ever, ever recommend running them. I've seen some people say, you know, oh, I've run it to learn Nurse a little bit better because I'm forced to blink on the survivor's back. In my opinion, no. In my opinion, I just wouldn't recommend it at all. Yeah, and that's why there's an F tier. They are two add-ons which actively make the power worse and offer no upside, no fun side of it, nothing, just terrible. Yeah, that's my add-on tier list. Whoopee! Okay, so another thing I wanted to add into the guide are just some perk builds that I recommend. And I'm just gonna give you 3 here of kind of like a different playstyle and coming from a different aspect. So now that Cenobite is no longer in the store, Pinhead, and their perks are free for everyone, I have made this build, which is just full of perks that you don't need to play any other killer to unlock, and I still think it's a really strong build, so it'd be good if you're a beginner player. We're using Fragile Wheeze and Heavy Panting, which I explain more in the add-on tier list. Deadlock, which every time a gen is popped, the highest progress generator is blocked for 25 seconds, which is pretty massive. It gives you slowdown basically for free. Scourge Hook, Gift of Pain, which is going to punish the survivors for healing after you hook them on a Scourge Hook. Scourge Hooks are hooks that appear in white when you pick up a survivor, so you do want to make sure you're hooking on those white hooks when you are using this build. And it also takes them longer to heal after they've been hooked on one of those Scourge Hooks. But as well as that, it's going to synergize with Nurse's Calling, which shows you anyone that's healing within a 28-meter radius, because if you cut off that heal, the heal progress that they have will basically regress over time. So all of the progress that they've made will go down to 0 if you catch them healing after they've been hooked on a Scourge Hook. And then for the final perk, it's going to synergize with Nurse's Calling and Gift of Pain. It's Thanatophobia. If you have everybody injured, then generators take 108 seconds to complete instead of 90 seconds, which might not sound like a lot, but if you account that for every single generator on the map, Dead by Daylight is a game of seconds, and you kind of just need as much time as possible to do your job, which is hooking and killing the survivors. So Deadlock is going to give you some good gen slowdown, and then these 3 perks are going to synergize quite well together. For my second build, I've gone for some aura reading. We have a Jagged Compass, which is going to make every single hook that you hook on a Scourge Hook, and if you do hook on a Scourge Hook, then it's going to highlight the highest progress gen in yellow, so you'll know where to go after you hook. Predator, which is going to show you the survivor's aura after you leave chase, which is a ridiculous perk on Nurse. It basically just gives you a free hit. Floods of Rage, which after every single hook, because you're using Jagged Compass, is going to highlight all the survivor's aura when they get unhooked. And Lethal Pursuer, which is going to show you the survivor's aura for 9 seconds at the start of the game, and it's going to add 2 seconds to both Floods of Rage and Predator duration. So Predator is going to show you the survivor's aura for 6 seconds, and Floods of Rage is going to show you the survivor's aura for 9 seconds. And then I'm running Campbell's Last Breath and Jenna's Last Breath, which again, I speak more about in the add-on tier list. And then for the final build, it is actually the Nurse win streak build that I'm running at the moment, which if we have a look, I am almost on 150 wins in a row, so it's a pretty good build. Badman's Keepsake and Tooth, which I speak more about in the add-on tier list. Hex Pentimento. So every time the survivors cleanse a totem, you can go over and basically rebuild the totem. And if you have one totem that has been rebuilt, then all gens on the map will take 108 seconds instead of 90 seconds. And the healing speed, it takes 20% longer as well. So having this totem up, I kind of look at it like as if you've got your TV remote and you've paused. All progress in the match is kind of how it's like, because that 20% is so massive. And then for each additional totem that you've rebuilt as well, adds an additional 3% onto the 20%. So 23, 26, 29, etc. Then we've got Hex Ruin. So every single time a survivor gets off a generator, it will automatically start regressing. You never need to worry about kicking a gen unless this totem has been cleansed. Hex Undying, which means basically the first totem that they cleanse will just respawn as if it hasn't been cleansed at all. And if the survivors are near a dull totem at any point, it will show you that aura, which surprisingly you get quite a lot of value out of when you're playing Nurse. And then Thrill of the Hunt, which is going to make every single totem that is cleansed take so much longer. So why does this build work so well? If the survivors bash totems early game, it's going to take them so long to do the totems that they're not going to get any gen progress. If Ruin stays up, you're going to be downing so quick once you get a hold of the Nurse that they're going to be running for save, their gen's going to be regressing, it's going to be really hard for them to get progress. They also have to respect whenever you're near them and get off their gen early. And then if they do brute force totems, you can stick up Pentimento. And as long as if Thrill of the Hunt stays up, you're meant to lose a stack for every totem that's been cleansed. But if you reignite the totems with Pentimento, you regain those stacks. So imagine every totem on the map has been cleansed apart from Thrill. You put up 4 Pentimento totems, then you're getting, for them to cleanse the first Penti totem again, is going to take the same amount of time as it took to cleanse the first totem in the game. So they have to cleanse that extra long totem, which I think off the top of my head is 26 seconds. Don't quote me on that. Will take another 26 seconds. Insanely strong build. But yeah, hopefully you can get use out of one of these builds. Okay, another thing I wanted to do new for this Nurse guide is I wanted to make a Nurse map tier list. So I guess maps that you load in on and you might know that you have more of an advantage or you have less of an advantage, or maps that you should be struggling on or shouldn't be struggling on, in my opinion. So this might be, you know, certain maps that you can learn better, but without any more delay, let's just get straight into it. For me, S+ tier is a map that I load in on, and I'm like, well, unlucky survivors, you know, you lost the RNG. You know, nothing you could do, but you've already lost the game. And best map for Nurse in the game, in my opinion, right now, is Midwich. I stand in the middle courtyard, I can blink to pretty much every single gen on the map, and that pressure alone is crazy. Like, you can get a hook in the middle courtyard, and not a single gen on that map is safe. And that is absolutely ridiculous. The chase potential for survivors on this map is extremely low. The map control you have is insanely high. And it's just, it goes back to that 20-meter respect. Like, no survivor can be within 20 meters of you without risking a hit. Midwich is that to an absolute T. In my opinion, best Nurse map in the game. Second best Nurse map in the game, yeah, upstairs, there's not many line of sight blockers at all. You can see everything. It's the same thing again. Any gen that you're working on isn't really safe. You either have to pre-run the gens to a point where you're not going to be getting much gen progress at all, or you're sticking the gens and you're constantly risking giving the Nurse a free hit, basically. Yeah, very similar reasons to Midwich why it's extremely good, but it's an extremely good map. S tier, so now we get more to, okay, these are just maps that are winnable for the survivors, but still extremely good maps for Nurse. Now, Coal Tower, very interesting map. Nurse plays this in comp in a lot of formats. There is a gen spawn in Coal Tower where you will traditionally get, main building will have a gen, then there's a gen next to main and a gen on the other side of main. So, that main building gen, if you can 3-gen with it, as in 3 gens are left, they have to pop one of them to get the exit gate done, because that's what happens when you pop 4 gens. There are only 3 gens left on the map. So if you protect these 3, you're in a ridiculously strong position, because that main building gen is impossible to do, basically. Nurse blinks up there. If you get hit on that gen, you are dead. If you drop down, Nurse just blinks straight down and you're dead because it's a completely free hit for the Nurse. As soon as she sees you're dropping down, she instantly teleports to the bottom and gets the hit. Or if you run down the stairs, you're still stuck in the building, you haven't made much distance. Very difficult. Just a very good map for Nurse. Very small, very easy for her to traverse. Not that many crazy line of sight blockers. Very good Nurse map. I feel like I don't need to go into much more detail than that. Also, I think Macmillan, very good hitboxes. It's not like I tend to get stuck on many things. I do quite like when I load in on Macmillan. And that stays the same because now we have Suffocation Pit. Another one with the generators. You get 2 sides of the map. You get top side and you get bottom side. And more often than not, it's going to be a 3-1-3. So 3 gens spawn on one side, 3 on the other, 1 in the middle. And Nurse can just play one side of that map. And depending on how many gens she get there, because you can get up to 5 gens on one side. It's just a very small area with a lot of gens for you to defend. You get 1 hook in the middle, you're defending a hook, and 5 gens potentially. Insanely good map. Next, we have Dead Dog. I showed this as an example earlier on in the guide. If you get a hook in the middle of that map, you can... So, kind of like where the intersection of the road is, if you know what I'm talking about. You can get that hook, and then you've got main building is unsafe, gallows is unsafe for the same reason that the coal tower main is unsafe. You either drop down or you run down the stairs. If you run down the stairs, you're not making much distance. If you drop down, Nurse can cut you off. Pretty rough. And then also on that side next to gallows, you have all of those gens that can sometimes spawn a 4-gen there, which you can all hold within 1 blink's distance, which is absolutely ridiculous. The edge map, I feel like, on Dead Dog as well, is not too much of a problem. The one issue I would say with this map is the kind of bottom side of the map, where all the jungle gyms are. That can be a bit rough. It's not somewhere where I'd want to chase, but you can just avoid chasing there, and because you're Nurse, you can do that, and you can profit quite well. First, cold win on the tier list, we have Thompson House. Again, it's a repeating pattern, right? Upstairs gen, you can't get away from it quick enough. If you do try to get away from it quick enough by dropping off, Nurse will just cut you off. You're dead. And you get that gen spawn of, like, you can have 2 on one side of the building and then hold it with main. There's a lot of these, like, vertical gen spawns, which are very, very good for Nurse. And, yeah, I mean, it's a repeating theme, right? As you'll see in the next one, Father Campbell's Chapel. Circus side can spawn 4 gens together. Shack side can spawn 4 gens together. You can normally, the middle gen is the main building, which because you're a Nurse and you can blink straight up there and they can't really see where you're coming from, you could also hold with it. So Father Campbell's Chapel for me is up there. After that, we have Azarov's Resting Place. Again, one of the 2-sided maps. You don't have the verticality on this one, and you're less likely, I think, to get like a 5-gen spawn on Azarov's. Normally, at most, it's like a 4-gen, I think, or at least from my experience. But it's pretty much the same as Suffo Pit. Azarov's, I think, there is more clutter. There's more line of sight blockers, and the hitboxes tend to be a little bit worse. So that's why it's not as good as Suffocation Pit, in my opinion. But still a very good map. Still very easy to hold the gens. You get a hook deep on one side. It's incredibly hard for the survivors to come back. Even if they are, you know, a very strong 4-man playing to win the game, you know. With absolute effort from them, it's going to be tough. And now we get into A tier with our first map, Wrecker's Yard. Small map, basement in the middle. You get a hook on that basement. It's going to be really, really rough for the survivors to come back. The only thing that's, like, more redeeming for the survivors is it's quite big. If they do run the edge map and they die in, like, the pockets on the edge, it can be a little bit tough. But also, if you have a perk like Agitation on this map, you just drag them to the middle, you drag them to the basement, you drag them anywhere. You're going to get some nasty 3-gen spawns on this map as well. I think overall a very good map for Nurse. I'm pretty happy if I load in on this. We got the Groaning Storehouse. Now, this one's a little bit weirder. You can get some nice 3-gens around main, but also you have the pockets, which the survivors can pull you to and die in. Very much the counterplay of Nurse is, like, dying in the right location, and there are some very good locations to die in on this map. So it's up there, but it's not, you know, like the S tier maps, in my opinion. After that, we've got Blood Lodge. Blood Lodge, yeah, very decent Nurse map. It is very open, so the survivors can see you coming, so it's good for the survivors if they're going to pre-run. However, you could also look at that from the flip perspective. There's not a lot of LOS blockers for the survivors to run. Decent Nurse map. Again, it's not anything crazy. Like, I don't load in on this and I'm like, oh my god, I've won the game already. It's pretty decent for both sides, but if I load in on Blood Lodge, I'm pretty happy. I think I put that up pretty high. I don't think there are any gen spawns which are too crazy on Blood Lodge off the top of my head either. But yeah, pretty decent map for killer all round. Okay, the next one in A tier for me is going to be the new Vecna map, which I cannot think of the name of. But the dungeon map, yeah, I mean, the teleports don't do a whole lot to Nurse if you just learn where the teleports come out, because you can kind of blink across very quickly. And Nurse at any point can just be like, oh, she doesn't need to go through the teleports, right? She doesn't need to go down the stairs in the basement. She could just be by Shack and all of a sudden you're on top of a gen, right? So the survivors pre-running needs to be insanely good to not leak those free hits from just getting hit off gens, right? She just has a lot of pressure because she is constantly able to go from top to bottom and bottom to top. And it's like on maps like that, Nurse really does profit because every other killer needs to go through those teleports, right? Needs to either go down the basement stairs or needs to go through the teleporters. Nurse doesn't care. She doesn't need to, and she can just blink right on top of your head. After that, I've got Ironworks. Again, I think Macmillan is just a very good map for Nurse. Ironworks is not anything too insane. You can get some nice 3-gen spawns on the bottom side. You can get nice 3-gen spawns on the top right corner next to the main gen, where that normally spawns. Nothing too insane. I imagine blinking upstairs in the Ironworks is a bit of a struggle for newer Nurse players, but you can also get that down relatively easily, and then it's not much of a problem. Yeah, not a bad map at all. Again, nothing too insane, nothing too bad, but I'm pretty happy if I load in and I see Ironworks. After that, we have the Shelter Woods, forgot the name of it there. So it's been changed a little bit with the Skull Merchant release, but still, I think a pretty good map for Nurse. Again, Macmillan, pretty decent, not too many line of sight blockers, that kind of thing. It's not the best map in the world again, but that main building as well, if they do want to go up there, it's a bit of a death sentence. They get tagged, they have to drop down, you can cut them off, that kind of thing. You can get some decent 3-gen spawns to hold. Yeah, it's just not a map that I tend to struggle on. I think when I first started learning Nurse, I was struggling on this map a fair bit, but nowadays I don't tend to have as much of a problem with it, and that's why I say it's quite decent. Gas Haven, probably move the camera actually. Just gonna move the camera down so you can see the A tier. Gas Haven is, yeah, one of those ones that's alright. It's not amazing, it's not insane or anything. You can blink straight into main because they have no line of sight whilst they're doing that gen, which is quite good. I feel like one of the better loops is main against M1 killers, and of course, Nurse doesn't really have to worry about that. However, it is quite a big map, so if the survivors are dialed in and pre-running well, it's not the best in the world. After that, we've got Wretched Shop. Camera back. We've got Wretched Shop, which I think Wretched Shop isn't bad at all. You can get some really nasty 3-gens spawning around main, and they tend to be in dead zones as well with how that map generates, so not bad at all. I think legacy maps tend to be better for Nurse anyway, just with how they're designed. I think newer maps nowadays tend to be a lot more cluttered and be a lot more struggle for the Nurse, because you have to deal with the line of sight blockers and, you know, potentially getting stuck on something that just randomly spawns. Like, there tends to be a lot of clutter on the newer maps, which isn't as good for Nurse, in my opinion. After that, we got Temple of Purgation. Again, blink straight into the basement. You get a free hit. The survivor needs to go all the way up the stairs. You can blink to the top of the stairs. It's a bit of a death sentence. You can also get some really nice 3-gen spawns with behind main as well. Yeah, not a map that I love too much because the trees aren't great on this map, but in terms of 3-gens, in terms of the map overall, I'm pretty happy when I load into this map. Pretty happy when I load into Temple. Okay, we got the cinema map, the theater map. Whenever I play this map, I just play the middle. You normally get, like, around Shack in, like, a row, you'll have 4 or 5 generators, and then I try not to go too far towards main, and I try not to go too far towards the statue. Pretty good map overall. I tend to not really struggle with it. If you struggle playing around pallets, I can see it can be a bit of an issue, but blink outside of the pallet or blink into the pallet, you could kind of learn and see what the survivor likes to do on the pallet. Typically, you want to wait for the survivor to make a decision, and as long as if you're doing that, I think you'll be fine against 99% of teams on this map. After that, we got Rancid Abattoir, one of the better Colwyn maps, I think, for Nurse. You get gens spawning together by Shack. You get the middle one in main. Sometimes you get one in line with main as well, and then you tend to get gens on the other side as well, so you can kind of just lock down one side of the map. Not too many line of sight blockers. If you struggle with Corn, I can see this map being a little bit of an issue, but I think that's something that once you play on it for quite a while, you kind of just get used to the Corn and playing around it and just being a little bit more careful. Not a bad map for Nurse at all, in my opinion. And then we have Sanctum of Wrath, which again has the split gen spawns, so typically you'll have 3, 1 in main, 3 on the other side, and then you can kind of hold the choke point, because the survivors, to get to the other side of the map, if you know where they are, they need to go down like these tight sides, or they need to go over the top, which is something you could exploit. You can tag them as they're coming across, and then they have to run away from you back to the other side. So if you want to defend that one side of the map, whether you have a hook there or gens there, whatever, I seem to not struggle too much on this map. You can also use that main building to just as like an outpost to like look where the survivors are, blink on top of their foreheads. Gives you a lot of pressure just from chilling up there. And this is the new Eerie map, Dead Sands. Very much like Wrecker's Yard with the shack in the middle. I've not had any problems with it at all. Typically, I don't like Eerie. I don't like how bright it is, but if that's a real problem with you, if that's a real problem for you, you can get filters to work around how ridiculously bright Eerie is. And honestly, I would suggest it, because I think Eerie is just one of the worst lighting maps in the game. It's just so drastically different from every other map. It feels like you're loading in and getting flashbanged a bit. But yeah, for the same reasons that Wrecker's Yard is very good, pretty much the same reason Dead Sands is good. Basement right in the middle of the map. I like it quite a lot. I don't tend to struggle too much on this map. Line of sight blockers maybe a little bit more on this map than there are Wrecker's Yard, but at the end of the day, that's not destroying anything too much. The most important thing, I think, is the gen spawns and how, you know, basement is, how you can get hooks in the middle and play around it. You can get some nasty gen spawns on this map as well. And now we are making our way into B tier with Grim Pantry. Grim Pantry is a weird one, because as soon as you just ignore that main building gen, then you kind of just have all the rest of the gens in a line with each other. You can also get a pretty nasty gen spawn on the pier, and obviously Nurse straight up onto the pier, straight off the pier if they drop down, you know what I mean? No time at all. And you can get 2 gens spawning on the pier, and then 1 just off of it, right? And it's like, the survivors have to walk all the way up the pier. You don't. You're just straight up, straight away, and getting value. So I recommend that you just ignore the main building gen and then just play the rest of the gens. The thing that would put this in B tier for me is, like, there's a lot of elevation, and I think for newer nurse players, that's a bit of a struggle. It can even mess me up sometimes, how, like, the whole shack is on a hill, and then it kind of dips down, and it's like, those kind of elevations can mess up your blink a little bit, especially if you're not thinking about it in the moment. I think the edge map is a bit terrible as well. The map is kind of huge if the survivors want to take you to the edges and die there, which is the high level counterplay for nurse. Hatch spawn is pretty terrible on this map. Yeah, there's multiple reasons why when I load in on this map, I'm not the happiest man in the world, but overall, it's not the end of the world. You know, I load in and it's like, it's still a very winnable game. After that, we have Cowshed. So Cowshed is a weird one, to be honest. I wouldn't say it's like good for nurse. I wouldn't say it's bad. You've got the struggle of the corn. You can get some nice gen spawns around main, but the gens tend to be a bit more spread out, I think, nowadays. And I think I just have, since the map has been changed, I've had a fair few games where I've struggled. And I think that's really what's putting it in B. I can't really tell you why, but I just do tend to struggle on this map. The main building can be a bit of a problem with all the different things the survivor can do in there. And I just think the gen spread is tends to be pretty decent for the survivors. So that's why it's in B. It's more of a, like, my experience on that map than anything. I can't really tell you why it's my experience, but I tend to just not have the best games on that map. On the Cowshed. D tier, we're going with Family Residence, or Yamaoka Estate. So this, again, is one of those ones where it's like, you either have to play the shack side where there's going to be 3 gens, or you have to play the main side where there's going to be 3 gens. But again, the gens tend to be a lot more spread out than other maps. There's a lot of weird spawns. I think you can still even get, like, the rocks, which are spawning close to jungle gyms for some reason, which has been in the game for years. The edge map is pretty far away from everything else if they want to drag you away. And I think there's just a lot of line of sight blockers on this map that I don't really like to deal with. And that ultimately has put it in B. Ormond is the next one. So this one I think is much more open. It's much easier to land your blinks. However, the map is just big. It's just a big map. They can run you away. If they pre-run effectively, it can be a real big problem. Main building, it's not a terrible place to chase, but it's not amazing, especially if you are newer to nurse. You are going to struggle on that a little bit. Not too much to say about Ormond, to be honest. Not a lot of line of sight blockers, but if survivors do want to pre-run, they are going to give you a hell of a problem on this map. And dying edge map is not going to be great on this map either. So I think the direction of how easy this game is on Ormond is completely on how the survivors are playing. If the survivors are locked in, they want to make it a hard game for you, then they can, you know? And if the survivors, you know, don't really care that much about winning the game, maybe they're just chilling, playing with their friends, whatever, then I think it will be a relatively easy game for you because you will get pretty fast chases on this map if you know what you're doing. Next one is Rotten Fields. Again, gonna be a struggle for newer nurse players because of the corn. It is everywhere. I think you don't tend to get very good gen spawns on this map either. You do have basement in the middle, but the map is pretty big overall. There's not really much to say about Rotten Fields. Can you deal with the corn? Can you deal with the line of sight blockers? There's not really good gens. It's not like I'm loading in. I'm like, okay, I know what I'm doing with my gens. I know what 3 gen I want to hold, that kind of thing, if things do go bad. I think when you load into pub games, you don't typically want to be like, okay, I'm holding this 3 gen from the start, but you kind of want to have like a backup plan if things go wrong. That's kind of how I tend to play. And yeah, Rotten Fields is just one of them where it's like, if it goes bad, it could go really bad, if you know what I mean. And I do think it is going to be a struggle for newer players on this. We got Torment Creek. Again, not very good gens. The main building can be a little bit of a struggle. It's a little bit finicky. There's a lot of weird spawns, like just random like sandbags and like little boxes and things which you can get caught on. A lot of the fillers on this map as well, I think, are a bit of a struggle because the survivor is completely hidden by just the filler palette, which is a bit iffy. And then you kind of have like a lot of hay bales and stuff that spawn by the fillers, so it can be harder to play around because you're blinking, you're trying to blink into the survivor's standing here, and maybe you have like a hay bale, then the survivor, then another hay bale behind them, and you're trying to blink there, but it will completely block your blink because it's kind of hard to explain. Maybe I'll flash up a diagram. If everything in a row is blocking, hay bale, survivor, hay bale, there's nowhere for you to land and your blink will just get cancelled completely. So yeah, I just think it's a finicky map. I don't really like playing on it too much. Again, it's one of those ones where you either play the bottom side or you play the top side. The top side, you're going to have good gens. Bottom side, you're going to have good gens. But if you start chasing willy-nilly and you don't have quick chases, which is definitely possible in this map, you're not going to have a good time. And that's why it's pretty middle of the range. After that, we have the Backwater Swamp. Pale Rose, the one with the big boats. It's not too much of an issue. I would imagine chasing main and chasing the small boat is going to be an issue for the newer nurse players. Honestly, in my opinion, it's the exact same reasons as Grim Pantry why I don't like it. Except with Grim Pantry, you ignore the main building gen, and then all of the other gens tend to be together. Whereas on this map, that's not really the case. Honestly, if I was playing this map, I would typically look for a gen spawn around Shack and try and play around that area, but that can be a struggle for newer players. There's just a lot of clutter. There's a lot of stuff which can block your blink. The jungle gyms are quite tight as well, so if you try to blink too close to the survivor will body block you out of your blink, which is a bit of a struggle. And again, I think chasing main is going to be an issue for newer nurse players, but that seems to be a repeating theme. Again, pretty middle of the range. Now, Hawkins is an interesting one. I actually have something to say. I'm not just going to repeat myself on this map. Hawkins, I think once you learn the layout and how the rooms spawn, because the room sizes are consistent. They always spawn. What's in the room is different, but the room sizes always spawn in the same place. And once you work that out, I think it becomes a lot easier. The gens are also spawning pretty close together on this map. So it's like the 20 meters of respect, right? If they're constantly pre-running off your terror radius, they're not getting much gen progress, which is good for you. And if they're not pre-running, then you're going to be getting free hits from just bouncing between chases and taking them off of gen. If this was for a higher level nurse player that understands the layout of Hawkins, I think this could be A tier. Probably wouldn't put it S, but maybe high A. And then for the newer nurse player, it's probably more of a C or a D tier map, to be honest. It's one of those maps that you just need to play on a few times and really understand. I think if you overcommit to chases, you can really struggle on this map as well. But as well, that glass room gen, higher up, same thing again. You blink straight up there, what's the survivor gonna do? They're completely dead if you get that hit. If you catch them on that gen, they are completely dead. So yeah, Hawkins, I think for somebody that's played nurse a lot, a good map. For somebody that hasn't played nurse as much, it's gonna be a bit of a struggle. But personally, I do actually quite like playing on Hawkins, probably more than this tier list suggests. And then we have the new Ormond in C, the Lake Mine. Main building, gonna be a bit of a struggle. The drop down and the little shack building. The little shack building, the one that isn't shack, but it looks like shack, it's got the upstairs and you can drop down underground. That is such a terrible place to chase. It is so intricate. Your blinks need to be so precise to land on them. I would just never recommend it. And it's just like, if I'm looking at that building, the survivor could have snuck down underground and I would have no idea, right? And then the underground area, you wouldn't really want to chase without being very, very close to the survivor. It's just not the best in the world. It's a pretty big map. I don't think there are any too crazy gen spawns off the top of my head. I load into this map. If the survivors know what they're doing, they know where to chase the nurse, it's gonna be a struggle. And again, because of how intricate the buildings are, it's really gonna be a struggle for newer nurse players. So that's why it is so low. After that, we have Borgo. Borgo, I just dislike in general. It's just very big. It's a very weird map. It started off being red, so it's harder to see the scratch marks and the auras and stuff. Yeah, just not an ideal map. It does have the benefit of, again, blinking up into main, and you can potentially get that 2-tap there if the survivor isn't switched on. But the gen spread is pretty massive. There's a big distance between the gens. If the survivors want a die edge map, that's going to be a problem for you. There's not really too many things that are swinging the way of nurse in terms of balance on this map. But of course, with all of these, nurse is an extremely good killer. So none of these maps are you going to load in and you're going to be like, oh, well, I've got this map, so I've got no chance. Unless you are very new to nurse, maybe, and then you will really, really struggle. But nurse, that's the good thing about nurse, is no matter what map she loads in, she's still got a pretty good chance. We got the Crotus Pren Asylum. We have main building, again, very intricate, very difficult. I even struggle with that main building quite a lot, and I have quite a lot of hours on nurse, even if I feel like I should be much better at nurse for the amount of hours I have in her. But yeah, I do struggle on main quite a lot. The gen spread is quite insane. You do have the deep pockets as well, which the survivors can drag you into and die in. And when they're dragging you into those areas and dying, the whole rest of the map, the survivors are free to pop gen, which is a big problem. That's why, even though it is Nurse's map, the map she was released with, it's not a good map for Nurse. I think back in the day, it used to be much better, but since then, the map's been reworked a few times, and I am not a big fan nowadays. Right after that, we have Haddonfield. Haddonfield is actually a killer-sided map now. One of those ones where behavior saw survivor-sided map and then just completely nerfed it into the ground, and now there's about 2 pallets on the entire map. So yeah, pretty decent for Nurse. You can blink straight up into that main building. Again, it's going to be a struggle because of how intricate the buildings are. If you're better with your blinks, you're not going to struggle as much. Newer Nurse players are really, really going to struggle on this map because a survivor's going to run you into a building. You're perhaps not going to know what that building looks like off the top of your head, and when you're outside blinking in, you kind of need to know roughly where things are. So that's just one of the more you play on the map, the better you'll get at it. Not any ridiculous gen spawns, in my opinion. You could potentially hold the House of Pain, so the one with the survivor basement with the God pallet, because you can blink straight into that basement and get a hit, and again, straight into the buildings and get a hit. But it's like when you're committing to chases, if the survivors know where to chase you and they're dying edge map, those edges as well with the pallets and the lockers can be a bit of a struggle, but it's not the end of the world. I think the main reason why it's this low is just the intricacies of the building. and how much that's going to be a struggle for people that aren't very, very used to using Nurse's power. And yeah, weird one. Maybe people expected to see Larry's lower, but honestly, the gen spawns on Larry's is what saves it. I think the way that you play this map, you don't overcommit to gens. If you, you don't overcommit to chases, and you focus more on protecting your gen. On the side by the picture here, you see the main room. You could get 5 generators that spawn by that main room. And as long as if you are near it, again, within 20 meters, you can blink on them in an instant, so the survivors need to respect that, otherwise they're just constantly giving you free hits. It's a real big struggle for the survivors to break that generator setup. And if you can get a hook there too, you're kind of guarding the hook, whilst protecting the gens, you're doing multiple things at once. Yeah, Larry's, once upon a time, I would have said, one of Nurse's worst maps. Nowadays, I don't think it's the case. I really don't. I think this is a much bigger struggle for other killers that have to deal with the god pellets, and Nurse doesn't. And you just play the top side of the map, and you're absolutely fine, I think. Or even if you get a better gen spawn on the bottom side, the survivors have to respect that 20-meter distance. If you've got any aura reading perks, nowhere to hide, predator, lethal pursuer, barbecue, you're going to be chilling on this map as well. Because you're going to see the survivor doesn't see you, you blink on their forehead, completely for free hit, you're chilling. Yeah, I think this map is a lot better than it used to be, and now we don't have very many maps left, as you can see. D tier, I would put Badham. Yeah, Badham, very intricate. The main building is not a good place to chase, again, for the same reason as Haddonfield, but I think Badham is worse. The gen split is better on Haddonfield. I think you have these bushes as well, which have never really had good hitboxes. It's really hard to blink in these areas where you have like a bush, and then a tiny little walkway, and then the building, which is tough. The map seems to be pretty open other than that. So as long as if the survivors are constantly running to the buildings, the bushes, the edge map, the main building, it's going to be a struggle for you. You don't really have good gen spawns in this map, in my opinion. And in general, Badham isn't a good killer map for that reason. And Nurse suffers the same fate. Yeah, that's why I put Badham as D tier. Next in D tier, again, might be a surprise to some of you, is RPD. But again, at least in my experience, I haven't had too many bad matches with RPD. I think RPD East is definitely better than RPD West. So I would do RPD East here, and I would do RPD West there. RPD West is a lot more intricate. The hallways are a lot tighter. You need to be a lot more specific with your blink. RPD East is a little bit more open. You can be more general. You see more. You have more line of sight, which is always better. But yeah, I think a lot of people would have expected RPD to be lower. But in my experience, at least recently, I've had a lot of fun with RPD, and I haven't really had too many struggles with it. Again, I think this is going to be a map which newer players to Nurse are going to struggle with a lot more, and that's just going to be a theme of Nurse in general. Typically for Nurse, the worst maps are the bigger ones and the ones that are more intricate, and sadly, the ones that are more intricate are always going to be worse for the newer player. But it's just one of those things, you just got to stick at it, you got to learn the map, you got to learn the precision with the muscle memory, and you will get better. It's just, there's no one in the history of ever that has had, you know, less than, I don't know, 10 hours in the game that's picked up Nurse and just been fine. You need to learn the maps, you need to learn the tiles, you need to understand how Nurse works, and then once you've done that, then you can really start doing well very quickly. And yeah, RPD is just going to be a struggle. If you're newer to Nurse, if you're newer to Dead by Daylight in general, RPD is definitely going to be a struggle. Okay, just after that, I am putting Red Forest. Red Forest is absolutely huge. You also have lots of trees, lots of line of sight blockers, lots of bushes with a little bit dodgy hitboxes, in my opinion. A main building, which is fairly intricate, not the worst in the world, but generally the main reason why this is where it is just the size of the map. It's huge, and there is a lot of line of sight blockers. There's trees everywhere, things like that. And that is a very simple one. That's why it is. It's big, and it's hard to see the survivors. And now we have our F tier, Garden of Joy. Horrible edge map, absolutely massive, terrible collisions on the bushes. Yeah, I load into this map, I'm not happy. I'm not happy. Gen spawns, they're doesn't tend to be a very good 3-gen. Yeah, Garden of Joy is just, like it is for every killer, not a good map for Nurse. The one tip I could give you is try and use that balcony on main, or the roof of main, to try and look out and see where the survivors are, like a UAV, to get information that way. It's just a tough map for killer in general, and Nurse is not the exception. Straight after straight after Garden of Joy, we have Eyrie of Crows. Big map, very intricate. The buildings are very small and they can be chained together. The edge map is not great. The main building is pretty intricate and can also be very awkward depending what angle you're blinking at, especially if you're chasing upstairs. The main building gen is downstairs as well. Boons can be put upstairs and then they are reaching a larger area of the map, and you would have to go all the way up there to stomp the boon. Even if you are a Nurse, that's still a decent time commitment. Just not a great map for killer in general. And again, Nurse is not the exception. Second to worst map for Nurse is Toba Landing. So much stuff is going on, so much distractions, so much bugs crawling all over the place. It's so bright. Very weird it's not like typically a DBD map in general. The jungle gyms are very weird. They're like very unique and very, very strange if you don't know the jungle gyms that spawn on that map specifically. All of the loops as well, for whatever reason on these alien maps, they're like bumpy. They're not straight walls. And that can mess up your blink sometimes because the hitboxes go in, you know, in and out rather than just being a straight line. The edge map, again, not great. It's a big map. The main building isn't good. I do think they've fixed most of the bugs on main building now, so it's not as terrible as it used to be. But I load in on this map and I'm like, oh god, okay, I've got to lock in because a few blinks go wrong, a few chases go bad, and this could totally go the other side. And then, worst nurse map in the game, in my opinion, Nostromo. I don't think that's a surprise. I think that's a bad map for a lot of killers. Yeah. And that is the full map tier list, in my opinion. Nostromo, the absolute worst. The main building is just very hard to blink into, and around you'll get your blink swallowed a lot of the time. Gen spawns tend to be pretty bad unless you get a ridiculously good gen spawn around the main building side. The map is massive. The edge map is bad for nurse. Again, it still has the problem of like the bumpy, wiggly walls for some reason. The jungle gyms are a bit odd. Yeah, it's just, I think if you were to play nurse a lot, I think you would struggle on the maps that are in F, and I think you would have a pretty good time on the maps that are in S. And let's just make sure they are all in here. So we've got S+, Midwich, and the game, and then F tier being Garden of Joy, Eerie, Toba Landing, and Nostromo. And then everything in between, as you can see. Let me just get out the way so you can take a screenshot if you need it. And there you go. In my opinion, with all of the justifications, even if they've just been very quickly speedrun, I think in my experiences, down here are the nurse maps that I tend to have worse games on, and up here are the nurse maps that I tend to have good games on in general.